We also have Adi Godrej joining in to talk about the companies as well as maybe even the macro developments. Mr. Godrej, thanks for joining in. You've joined in on an important afternoon. We've got these clarifications coming from the RBI. What is your general take on the recent macro developments that we've seen and the fact that maybe the market was even worrying that we are suffering from maybe capital controls, and now that Raghuram Rajan has stepped in as governor, have things improved on the margin?
Well, I hope so. I think today's developments seem encouraging. I expect the rupee will firm up soon. I think the right level for the rupee should be about 57 to 60. It has overreacted. Clearly, if you look at the inflation and other differences between the two currencies, it shouldn't go beyond 60. So I do hope the rupee firms up, because that's very important to contain inflation, contain the fiscal deficit, and for the stock market.
Mr. Godrej, hi, afternoon. So, just to take that point forward, do you think some, foreign investor nerves would also be soothed with the kind of clarifications that are coming, and maybe, it should lead to some bit of reversal in sentiment as well?
Yes, I hope so. I think sentiment is extremely important. The sentiment has been negative for some time. We need to do a lot to ensure that the sentiment from foreign investors improves very considerably.
From industry point of view, Mr. Godrej, I'll just come to Godrej Consumer in a bit, but from industry point of view, what do you think should be Mr. Rajan's top priority going forward?
I think the top priority is to contain the rupee depreciation. I think it has over depreciated. It's very important to do so, because otherwise, as I said, the macroeconomic picture might turn bad. And of course, the very good thing in the near future is that the agricultural season has been very good. The monsoon has been good. I expect strong agricultural growth, and there will be a multiplier effect on both industrial and services growth. So to take full advantage of the opportunities created, I think it's important that the rupee doesn't depreciate, and in fact appreciates from here onward to come back to a reasonable level of between 55 and 60.
Mr. Godrej, we've got a dismal Q1 FY14 GDP figure, and a lot of the economists have now slashed it to even sub 4% for FY14. What do you think? Do you think that we could we could possibly get a sub 4% figure for FY14 GDP?
No, not at all. I think there is mistaken thinking in those figures put out. I think the agricultural season will turn out to be very good. All the reports are extremely good, and the very good monsoon has filled up reservoirs, so that will lead to a very good rabi output also. So agricultural growth from a bad monsoon last year should be very good, and as I mentioned, there will be a multiplier effect, so industrial and services growth will also pick up. So I expect growth in the second half of this year to improve very considerably.
And Mr. Godrej, how would that translate into a company like yours, especially the rural growth and the kind of uptick that we have seen over there in terms of company specific growth? How would that translate into growth for Godrej Consumer?
I think it will be very beneficial for a company like Godrej Consumer, because rural growth will be very strong. We must remember that discretionary income growth in rural India will rise very much this year. It could be as high as a 20% growth. You must remember that a lot of rural income goes into keeping body and soul together in food, housing, shelter, etc. And in a good year, the discretionary income rises very considerably. That leads to strong purchases of products like FMCG products. So we've seen that in the past. Whenever a good monsoon follows a poor monsoon, there is very strong growth in the year of the good monsoon. So we expect strong growth. I think this will manifest itself October onwards, because agricultural incomes will come into the hands of the rural population from October onwards.
Mr. Godrej, just wanted to focus on the macros for a little bit. How would you think that the FIIs are, or the international community is actually viewing India? This is in light of what is even taking place with regards to maybe other emerging markets such as Brazil, Turkey, Indonesia. How is India being viewed versus the other emerging markets, and is there anything that they're looking out for specifically that would possibly isolate us from what the other emerging markets are doing at this point?
Yes, so as I mentioned, we should ensure that macroeconomic factors are kept under control, particularly the rupee, as I mentioned. We must remember that there are other developing economies like Nigeria, Bangladesh, for example, where the currency has not depreciated. So it's not that all developing country currencies have depreciated. So I think if the government applies its mind well, and it is trying to bring in reforms, and if the new Reserve Bank governor goes about it the right way, I think with the agricultural season being good, we can see a turnaround in both sentiment and GDP growth.
Mr. Godrej, you don't buy the theory that some quarters of government have that a rupee depreciation would lead to maybe a normal correction of the current account deficit and the overall deficit, because it would lead to a contraction in imports and would make exports competitive?
Of course it would. But you must remember, you don't need too much depreciation for that. So as I mentioned, 55 to 60 is also very considerable depreciation from the earlier levels prevalent about 2 years ago, or 45, and that should do the trick. And if there's over depreciation of the rupee, it will lead to inflation, fiscal deficit difficulties, and lead to a vicious cycle. So a reasonable level would be very beneficial.
Okay, Mr. Godrej, just one last question from my side. From a policy standpoint, any particular bills or legislations that you would like to see passed or see some movement on?
Yes, I think very clearly FDI in insurance and pension would help a lot, because it would bring in early FDI remittances to India, which would help buoy up the currency also. And of course, the great legislation which will make a huge difference is the goods and services tax. I understand some very good progress has been made on that. If that can be brought in at an early date, it will have a tremendously beneficial effect on the economy. It adds about 2% to the GDP growth rate, other things being equal, and it also helps exports very considerably, because all the costs within the Indian economy which are not refunded to exporters get automatically refunded when the GST comes into play. So it has a great beneficial effect to the economy. Now, I am not extremely hopeful that this will be done before the elections, but it's a possibility. I saw that the government has reacted very quickly to the suggestions from Parliament, and it could have a tremendous difference if that bill is passed.
Mr. Godrej,
the constitutional amendment is passed.
Indeed. Mr. Godrej, one final question, and since you have a large property business as well, what's your reaction to the overnight move from the RBI targeting this 2080 or 2575 scheme from real estate developers?
No, we won't be affected at all, because the schemes we have will be fully financed. I think what they've done is only when it is upfront payment they are going to stop it. So I think it's a sensible move. I don't think it will affect companies like ours, and we don't expect any negative effect from this move.
Yeah, but as an industry player, would you welcome that move? I mean, that's what I wanted to know. You may not have a presence over there.
I think it's a sensible move. It's a prudent move, and if the interpretation that some of the people who have analyzed this move is correct, I think I would welcome it.
All right, Mr. Godrej, thank you very much for joining in. So that's Adi Godrej talking about multiple issues, and also mentioning that the RBI clarifications that came just a few minutes ago have been encouraging, and that he hopes that the rupee will firm up. In fact, let's continue our tracking the rupee. Ajay Marva of HDFC Bank joins in